I'm thinking, I'm like, when have I ever really seen STIs, not advertised, but STI testing advertised more to teens or adolescents?
What's your carnal theory?
Education not doing its part in supporting, because for me, when I was in high school, we had a brief sex education class that was a few weeks long, and they just showed us these images of STIs, and they were like, this will happen to you, like, be
Oh my goodness.
afraid, like,
Was it
do
the
not
public
get it.
or private institution?
Public.
Okay.
Yeah. In
Interesting.
Massachusetts, so it's like a little bit more open. Like there's a little bit, we learned, I think I had much better than some people, but a lot of the discussion around STIs was totally fear-based. And none of it was equipping us with the knowledge of what happens after you do get one.
How to communicate with partners or how to navigate a positive diagnosis, because people, I feel like, are diagnosed and they think, their love life and life is over and no one will accept them. But we haven't been given the tools to navigate such conversations or to know that there are routes available to us.
Do you think that lack of communication education directly contributes to STIs continuing to spread?
It's so funny you say that, because I was thinking about that recently. And I do think that that's part of it. And I also think that mandated testing plays a role in that as well. And, I just made a post today on different types of herpes tests and screenings and things like that. But the CDC doesn't include that in STI screening, in your regular all-inclusive test. And there are several reasons for that, but there are arguments and people go back and forth. And even I go back and forth with myself in my head sometimes about, should herpes be included? Because everyone does pretty much have one kind of herpes. The psychological impact is a lot with the stigma, but I also think it would really encourage conversation and help to normalize it as something like, oh, like it's just herpes. Like I'd love to get to that point where I'm surrounded by people or receive messages that say, I'm in this place where I feel like it's just herpes, like it's okay. But yeah, I do think that plays a role.
And what kind of resources, I'm going to go within the classroom to start, it's where we need to be starting. What kind of resources do you see needing to be there in order to make longer term change?
So I think we need to integrate more sex positive, pleasure based conversations all around sex ed. So I don't think we should necessarily, I know it's hard as an educator breaking things down by days or topics or lessons, but I really think you need to make an effort as an educator to be inclusive throughout the time you have with your students. How does pleasure based sex play with people with STIs? How does barrier methods, how does that impact that population? So really making a more inclusive effort to share, and I think statistics are helpful because they do give that pathway, like, wow, like I didn't know that. But how many of us really learned that the most common symptoms of STIs is no symptom at all? Like Amanda was saying, you were taught to fear them and fear these most extreme cases likely of lesions or warts or whatever they were. But instead of teaching about how to approach or treat the symptom, I think we really need to approach how to engage in that communication with our partners, with ourselves, self-advocating with our practitioners. I think those are the conversations that we really need to instill in our students and in our friend groups too.
What does it mean to self-advocate with your practitioner?
So unfortunately, specifically for herpes, because it's not a mandated test, doctors will say, well, the CDC says that you don't have to have it and you're presenting symptoms, so you don't really need it. So advocating for your health in that sense, being able to say, hey, I've done my research and, I slept with a partner who had herpes and I'd really just like to know for myself and for my future partners. And, this is the test I want. Or for more marginalized populations, unfortunately, they shouldn't have to do more emotional labor than there is, but sadly that's the case, especially with regard to guidelines around STIs. So with more marginalized populations, LGBTQ, race, all of those factors play into self-advocating and really creating space for yourself and your identity to have open conversations with your practitioners. And as much as I wish and hope that all of our healthcare providers are equipped with the knowledge that we need to make the best decisions for us, sadly, legislation isn't necessarily on our side. And sometimes I often feel that there's a missing component to, gynecology offices or healthcare offices, sexual health. I feel like there needs to be a sexual health advocate there or someone in place, because most medical professionals don't get the human sexuality knowledge that they really need to engage in some of these conversations with people. And I think that often really affects a positive diagnosis. Someone might, like Amanda was saying, have that fear show up, and a practitioner might just be very cold or come off cold unintentionally, but they might not have the knowledge or the skill set to navigate the psychological impact of that diagnosis.
Well, and then you have the elitism and the privilege of these kits. I mean, the cost price point just immediately cuts out
availability. Doesn't mean it's accessible.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Yeah, and we brought this up on another interview. It just seems baffling that something this beneficial for the population overall of being a public health issue basically is not more accessible, and that one of the few organizations that does bring accessibility to many people, Planned Parenthood, is so attacked. I don't even know if I have words.
I don't either. That's why I'm just like, ugh.
But we need to have words because it needs to be addressed. I'm curious, other than Planned Parenthood, are there local, brick and mortar resources that are affordable that you know of, that are places people can go?
I know in Philadelphia, there's the Mazzoni Center. I'm in Philly, and I'm sure there might be a few STI testing clinics here and there. But again, I'm not sure, if they offer herpes screening or testing, because again, not mandated, not sure. I believe you might be able to order some through LabCorp, the test through LabCorp. But again, accessibility, I'm not sure what that price point is. And then you have to go take it to a lab and have someone do that.
And not easily accessible for somebody who's younger either, because with these kits, you usually need a credit card, which you might not have. And you're probably not going to go get your parents' card. Yeah. You don't want that showing up on their line. So, or even just being able to drive yourself somewhere.
This is really interesting that you bring that up, because I'm like, when have I ever really seen STIs, not advertised, but STI testing advertised more to teens or adolescents? Mm-hmm. And I don't think I have.
And that's where it needs to start.
Mm-hmm. It needs to start earlier.
Both to get in the habit of it, to create good foundations for knowing what your status is, so that you can either not spread it or, take precautions, whatever needs to happen. Obviously, it helps destigmatize it if it's a regularly scheduled, testing.
Right.
I feel like that very much loops back to the need an in-school advocate, or I have this vision right now of a bus that's always out front of a school, and that's just that's where
the magic school bus. Oh, the magic school bus.
Yes. That would be awesome.
Right? I want one.
Yeah. Come on. Let's get on it.
But it's so funny because, I think I'm like, my parents, I was raised Catholic school. So obviously my sex ed was not very great. But, you start hearing about cold sores when you're younger, like, your aunt or your grandma gave so-and-so a cold sore. So that would be a really great introduction for parents to even say, well, there's other, that's called herpes. Because that's a battle that I face with my followers and just people on the internet, is people rejecting data. It's not even opinion. You're rejecting that it's herpes. I'll say, well, cold sores are herpes. No, they're not. I don't have herpes. And there's this discomfort with the word herpes itself. It's an awkward kind of saying word. But it's so fascinating to me how people, I saw a post recently. It said, it's not an opinion. You're rejecting data. You're rejecting fact.
Yeah.
I'm going to refrain from going on a tangent about this, but that makes me then think about how parents have this responsibility too. This isn't just, this is what you go to school for. Yes, this should be something that is included in our school education, but there's plenty of other basic life aspects that we know also aren't included in our school education. So maybe not, this should be in consideration, included in that. But as a parent, and whatever a parenting course should include and be, in order to make sure that you're bringing the right, the right example and the right education.
Sex Positive Families is great resource as always for that.
Yes.
I send all of my friends with kids there.
Yes. I mean, if your kid is sexually active, you should taking them with you to get tested is just a great way to normalize it for them. Right. You show that you're in it with them. You're also looking out for their health. You go to the doctors with them. Why wouldn't you? Well, maybe once they're sexually active, you're not going to the doctors with them anymore, but probably you are, because my mom came with me until I was 18.
Yeah, because I didn't have a car and needed a dress.
Exactly. Or it's just, we're getting a bunch done at one time. Go with your mom, go with your parent, whoever it is that you're most comfortable with. But doing that with your parents shows that, there's no shame in it. there's no shame. And it's just looking out for yourself and looking out for your wellness.